During his Beijing visit, Putin said peace is possible if common sense prevails. He added, however, that if not, Russia would use military force to achieve its goals. Ukraine must renounce NATO ambitions, stop discriminating against Russian speakers, and cede control over Donbass. Putin publicly invited President Zelensky to Moscow for talks, but that proposal was immediately deemed knowingly unacceptable by Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, who pointed out that at least 7 other countries had offered to host peace talks instead. Zelensky is pushing for more Western pressure on Russia and broader security guarantees. This includes participation in talks hosted by Emmanuel Macron in Paris and discussions with U.S. President Trump. Military escalation. Russia launched over 500 drones and missile attacks overnight across Ukraine, injuring civilians and targeting energy infrastructure.
This wave of attacks has once again highlighted the fragile and dangerous situation facing Ukraine. Entire regions were left without power for hours, and emergency crews worked through the night to restore critical energy supplies. Local authorities reported dozens of injured civilians, including children, as residential areas were struck. The attacks were described as part of Russia's strategy to wear down Ukraine's resistance by targeting both its people and its infrastructure. Internationally, the strikes drew swift condemnation. European leaders warned that such escalation pushes the conflict even further from a peaceful resolution. The United Nations called for restraint, while humanitarian organizations expressed growing concern about the impact on civilians as winter approaches. At the same time, Western nations are under pressure to increase their military and financial support for Kyiv. Discussions in Washington, Brussels, and other capitals now focus not only on sanctions against Russia, but also on providing Ukraine with advanced air defense systems to counter the relentless drone and missile attacks. For Ukraine, the stakes could not be higher. President Zelensky continues to argue that any compromise without strong guarantees would leave the country vulnerable to future aggression. For Russia, meanwhile, the message from Beijing was clear. It is prepared for diplomacy, but only on its own terms, and if those terms are rejected, it will continue to rely on force. The path forward remains uncertain. On one side are calls for negotiation and dialogue. On the other, the reality of ongoing strikes and military escalation. As the conflict grinds on, the world is left to wonder whether peace through common sense is truly possible, or whether the region is heading toward an even deeper and more destructive chapter of war.